En Telemundo Arizona seguimos conociendo a los candidatos que estarán presentes en las boletas durante esta contienda electoral. Hoy nos acompaña el candidato que busca ser el próximo procurador general del estado por parte del partido republicano, Hamadeh. Thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate your time, and we want our voters to know who you are, specifically the Latino voters, which are going to be key during these elections. First of all, who are you?
I've been asked that quite a bit because I seem to have come out of absolutely nowhere, right? I mean, this time last year, I hadn't even announced my campaign for Attorney General. I was just getting off my Army tour. I was serving overseas in the Middle East with the United States Army for 14 months. But I'm a former prosecutor at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, a former Army Reserve intelligence officer. But I decided to announce my campaign because I'm not satisfied with the direction of our state and our country right now. So if you're looking around us, this rising crime, this open border with fentanyl pouring in, I think it's time to get back to the basics and get back to law and order.
We know you've been a strong advocate that the Attorney General has to separate his views from enforcing the law.
Absolutely.
What exactly does this mean? Because I know you are also very strong in certain topics such as immigration, such as abortion, such as certain laws that are here in the state. Are you going to be able to separate your views to the job if you get elected?
I already have. I mean, as a prosecutor at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, that's what you do. I mean, you have your political views, but you don't allow that to influence your decision making as a prosecutor. Same with me. I mean, I had, as an Army officer who served overseas for 14 months in the Middle East, I served under both President Biden and President Trump. I think that's the difference, is you have to separate your political views from actually the job at hand. But I mean, you're right. I mean, there's so much issues that the Attorney General's office tackles. I mean, with regards to border, talking about the fentanyl crisis, but for the Hispanic community particularly, I mean, I'm the son of immigrants. My parents came here from Syria 30 some odd years ago. I have family in Venezuela, so I'm a product of immigration. I understand how important it is. And the Hispanic community is very rich in Arizona. The thing that I'm so disappointed by is when I got back here, it seems like our culture has changed so quickly. I mean, I never heard of this term Latinx before until the past few years, and now it seems to be perpetuated by white academic liberals who want to change the Spanish language. And I think it's offensive to the Hispanic community. So this is where I fight. I have my convictions. I fight back against the narrative that they try to shove down our throats, like the Latinx. I mean, this is offensive to the Spanish language, which is beautiful. It has gender pronouns with masculinity and feminine pronouns. So that's where I do. I mean, I know some people might think it's strong, but you have to be tough in this job.
But speaking about points of views and immigration specifically that you brought up, we know ex-President Trump, who endorses you, and you were at a rally last time he was here, has been he's used some description of the immigrants who are crossing the border that some people might find it rude, like all of them are criminals or they're in the country to do bad things, when you're an example that there's families who are actually coming here for a better future. So what's the difference between, or how can you make a difference between people who are actually want to come here to do good things and criminals? Can we put them all in one box?
No, I mean, I would hope you can't put everybody into a box, but we have to understand what's going down at our southern border. I mean, it's lawlessness. I mean, only 6% of the people coming across our southern border are actually Mexican. Most of them are coming from all over the world. I mean, when I was just down there in Yuma, I saw Russians, I saw Indians, I saw Chinese. So I think what we're saying is that we are a country, we have laws, and we need to respect those laws. I mean, if I were to go down to Mexico, I would be apprehended by the Mexican officials, and I think we should expect the same coming, across the United States. So, I don't think it's, I think right now you have to understand, we all support the American dream. I mean, obviously, I'm a product of immigrants. My family came here seeking the American dream and a better opportunity. So I think it's important to keep and maintain that, and how you do that is by restoring law and order. The way that they've eroded this idea of law and order has been so shocking. I mean, look at the rise in crime in our cities, right? I mean, you're seeing this defund the police movement, which is an absolute stupid idea that the Democrats literally tried pushing. And I stand up against that. That's why I've been endorsed by every single law enforcement organization in Arizona.
And to change a little bit of topic, we know you're being very strong advocate of the 2020 election. I heard you speak at the rally. I've followed you since you announced your campaign, and you still believe something went wrong in the 2020 election. What's your take on that? And how can people trust that they're going to go vote and it's going to be counted? I mean, it's the same system that got you elected in the primary. So how bad is it in Arizona?
Well, I think what we all need to understand, we want free, fair, and competent elections, right? I mean, I wasn't here in the 2020 election. I was actually serving overseas in the Army. And I always bring up my story. I voted by email. And when I got back here, I had multiple mail-in ballots at my house. So they haven't been cleaning the voting rolls, and I think it's unacceptable. But when you talk about the problems in August primary that I won pretty decisively, I mean, there were problems in that election. The Pinal County ran out of ballots. They ran out of Republican ballots. I think that's unacceptable. Incompetence, we should never tolerate that. And we just saw just last week with Secretary of State Katie Hobbs sending out 6,000 ballots to the wrong people with the federal ballot. So I think, why are we tolerating incompetence? All we're saying is that we need to be held to a higher standard, because our elections are sacred. I mean, so many immigrants who come to this country, like my family did, they don't have that. They don't have that luxury back where they came from. And my family came from Syria, which is autocratic, right? I mean, so many people and immigrants understand what makes this country so beautiful and special is that we have a system of elected representatives, and we need to maintain that through the right to vote.
It sounds a little bit more toned down right now, because I've heard you be very strong about prosecuting and going to get those who did something wrong in that election. Has that changed a little bit? Do you think that's something people want to move forward? And a lot of the Republicans, especially here in Arizona, that's a main part of the whole campaign.
I don't think I've changed at all. I think maybe my Twitter, but my Twitter is not how I speak.
Okay.
I talk about fraud existed, right? I mean, we saw prosecutions just last week. Even Attorney General Brnovich has added more prosecutions down in San Luis. So, I think it's a problem. If anybody tries to hijack our election system, we need to prosecute that to the fullest extent of the law. And I am tough, but I'm also a nice guy. So, I think it's it just depends. It really is just understanding that idea that, I've served in the military. We've rightly or wrongly spread democracy around the world, right? We see those images and those videos of people dipping their fingers in ink, and they're so proud that they voted overseas. And, unfortunately right now, with the confidence in our elections at an all-time low, we need to restore that trust again.
So what's your idea of a clean, fair election? Is it non-mail-in voting? Is it everyone voting the same day? What's your picture perfect when it comes to the process?
Well, I think we need competent elections. So what happened in August with the primary, where they ran out of Republican ballots, I think everybody can agree that that was unacceptable, right? And I think we need to try to prevent that from ever happening again. But you look at, mail-in ballots, for instance. When it's election day, and now suddenly it's 30 days. And when I was overseas, I voted by email. I literally had to print out my ballot from a computer, fill it out, take a photo of it on my phone, email it out. None of it was anonymous. I think that's a problem for our military service members, that they don't have anonymous ballots, right? So I think this is where we need to make sure that we actually get the results of the election on the same day. I mean, if you remember Bush v. Gore back in 2000, Florida screwed up that election, and I think what they recognized, they need to fix it, and that's what happened. And now they get the results on the same day, and I wish Arizona could do that as well.
Something we heard this weekend on your Twitter is that you tweeted, "The media is the biggest threat to democracy." Why do you think is that? And don't candidates, in a way, need media because people need to get to know you, and this is like a good way to do it?
Sure. I mean, when you talk about the freedom of the press is so important, right? But the media, when I talk about the media, I mean the propagandists. So often what you're seeing right now is the media, they live in the echo chamber, and they just promote democratic policies. I mean, they're the ones promoting this defund the police. I tweeted about the Arizona Republic over the weekend, where they were calling to fire firefighters and police officers because they were refusing the vaccines. And now because they're, transmissibility. And now we recognize that, transmission was never a part of the vaccine process. So that's what I talk about. The media needs to start questioning officials instead of just being the propaganda arm of the ruling class. So, obviously the media plays an important role, and you do have this is a huge influence. I mean, your job is so important. You have to understand that, and getting the facts out, like this interview, is going to be very helpful for the viewers to understand, my perspective. But yeah, the media calls me the biggest threat to democracy. And it's offensive because I've actually taken that oath to defend our Constitution. While the media, too often, just like our professors, they sit behind a desk at the universities and they try to lecture us on what protected democracy is. No, I want the media to do a better job at it.
Do you think this kind of message and rhetoric when it comes to the election fraud, the media being the threat, instead of helping, it creates more division in a way and intimidation to people who do that job and those roles, especially like the Maricopa elections office or people who work as volunteers, you know, to make sure they're also passionate about the elections, but this message in a way threatens what they are wanting to do?
Well, I actually, on my drive here, I just tweeted out another message. So the voter intimidation is unacceptable and undemocratic, right? When we saw those images and videos of people, you know, armed with military gear and with weapons. But then what happened this morning, I just saw an article, you know, in the fake news Phoenix New Times, which is a trash organization, by the way. They just came after a donor of mine. They literally published him saying that he donated to my campaign, and they just doxed him. How are we talking? What they're doing is donor intimidation, and that's an infringement upon your right to, you know, support candidates. So I wish the media can see their own hypocrisy with that. That's why I go after it. But you know, the issues that Arizonans really care about is the rising crime, which is affecting Hispanics more so than any other community, because this whole defund the police movement has really made officers scared to do their jobs, right? And look at the fentanyl coming across our southern border. That's what voters care about. But too often the media lives in their echo chamber, where they forget how much the policy affects everyday Arizonans.
We know the current Attorney General has been very forward with the Biden administration,
Yes.
with a few lawsuits. He's been vocal about against the administration. Is that something you're going to continue? If you are elected, you're probably going to be in charge of either enforcing or not the 308 proposition, which is for dreamers, and if they're going to be able to pay in-state tuitions or not. What's your take on that? Is that also the role of an attorney general, to go after the administration when he believes something is not right for Arizona specifically?
Sure. Well, there's two questions what you just asked. So regarding the proposition,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not going to comment on potential law, you know, litigation that I might have to go in, but you know, whatever the voters decide, I'm tasked to uphold that law. That's the role of the Attorney General. I mean, I don't create the laws. That's what the legislator, or that's what the people do. In regards to the Joe Biden administration, of course I'm going to fight them on any unconstitutional act. We just saw what they just did. I mean, you know, Brnovich and the other Republican attorneys general, they just basically scared the Biden administration to roll back the $10,000 student debt forgiveness, which is so unfair to those, you know, who actually paid off their debts in college, or those who didn't go to college, who didn't have the means. So that's where you were talking about. I am going to fight back against the Biden administration's infringement on Arizonans' rights and on our security. So this is where, you know, I agree with Brnovich's positions of him fighting the Biden administration on the vaccine rollouts, the Title 42, when they try to remove that in place. So, you know, that is the job of the Attorney General, is to secure our rights and to make sure Arizonans are free. But, you know, I think that's exactly what the purpose of the AG's office is, and I'll continue that.
We know the scams have been rising here in Arizona, and a lot of the victims are Hispanic community, but sometimes they're scared to talk to authorities because of their immigration status, or just because they feel there's no connection.
Yeah.
If you're elected, how are you going to make sure that the Hispanic community, which is a lot, especially in Maricopa County, can feel safe to call your office and know they're going to be helped?
Yeah. Well, my message is to any victim that you will always have a voice at the Attorney General's office if you've ever been a victim of a crime. That's what I did as a prosecutor at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and that's exactly what I'll do as Attorney General. Regarding scams, I mean, my own father experienced this too. You know, he has limited English ability too, even though he immigrated 30 some odd years ago. You know, it's not the perfect English, but you know, he was a part of a scam by somebody calling up the phones, a consumer, saying that they're going to shut off his electricity, right? And you know, that feeling, I want victims to not feel as if they should be ashamed of that. They have to come to Attorney General's office, because law and order doesn't just affect citizens, it affects any person who's here, whether they're here as a visa, on a tourist visa, or whether they're here as an immigrant. But you know, that's what my job is, to make sure the laws are actually enforced.
From here to election, what's your strategy? It's almost here. And the second part of that question, would you accept the result no matter who wins the election?
So my strategy right now going forward, we got about 14 and a half days or so, and doing these type of interviews, going out to the people, having events and rallies. I mean, this has been an incredible journey, right? I mean, I'll be the youngest attorney general since Bill Clinton, actually, and that's where it's so exciting. I mean, I had a tough primary, and I have a tough general election opponent, but I feel very confident right now that so many Americans and Arizonans are not satisfied with the direction of the Democratic Party, how they've led us right now. Inflation's the highest. We have a wide open border. We've got a rising crime. So that's where I'm going to get the message out, continue to get that message out, reach out to the Hispanic community, which is so critical. We have the endorsement of Henry Cejudo, a great Mexican-American UFC champion. But, in regards to the election results, of course, I'm going to accept the results of the election. I mean, that's the entire purpose of this country, is the peaceful transfer of power. But we need to make sure our elections are free, fair, competent, and honest, and transparent, to be quite honest. And I don't want what happened in Pinal County to ever happen again, where they run out of ballots, because it's going to sow distrust in our election systems, which we can't afford.
So on election night, your team and you yourself, how are you going to be monitoring this? Do you have a strategy behind it for you to be convinced that it was done in a fair way?
Well, I can't speak on hypotheticals, but there's going to be a lot of elections attorneys with both parties are going to have that to see if there's any discrepancies. But I think right now, I'm optimistic that this is going to be a very good Republican year for us. So if there's any shenanigans, I'm hopeful that it can overcome that. But this is where I say, when I take office, we're going to go back into securing our elections as well. I mean, there's a lack of confidence in them. So my job is to restore that confidence, which means that work with the legislature, work with the governor to have enhancements on our election system.
And to end with, I just need a follow-up for that. Where do you think the mistrust happened? Where was that when we switched? Because in Arizona, we've been doing elections the same way for many, many, many years. And it seemed like it used to work. And it elected Republicans as well as Democrat candidates. So what happened between these years that it's a completely different story?
Well, I think the media has lost their mind in many ways. And when I talk about being the biggest threat to democracy, when you had in 2020, literally Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook say that he worked with the FBI to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. I mean, think about that. That is so offensive for the media and for social media companies to suppress that from the American people. That's when we talk about the distrust. And you saw in Arizona, we had an Obama-appointed federal judge extend the voting registration deadline by 2 weeks. And in that time period, before he was finally struck down by the Ninth Circuit because it was unconstitutional, you had 30,000 new voters added to the voter rolls. That's unacceptable that they changed the rules in the middle of the game. So that's what we talk about, the difference. But I mean, if you're looking how I voted overseas, typically military members, I got mail. I could have voted by actual mail-in ballot, but I voted by email. That was another reason and how they changed the system that way.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just looking forward to serving Arizonans as the Attorney General, and I think we're going to have to go back to restoring law and order, respecting our police, and making sure we have a secure border, because right now, I know better than most that the American dream is alive, but we cannot have prosperity without security, and that's exactly what I'll restore.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Candidato republicano a Procurador General del Estado, Hamadeh, estuvo aquí con nosotros. La entrevista completa en telemundoarizona.com. Buenas tardes.